Meta has announced their Llama 4 suite of multimodal AI models.
What if AI could unlock hidden cures from existing medications?
OpenAI with a memory upgrade to ChatGPT.
Can AI craft engaging minute-long videos from simple text prompts?
Microsoft unveiling major updates to its AI platform, Copilot.
Can AI help breathe new life into classic cinema?
Anthropic introduced a Claude Max subscription. Amazon, who launched their Nova Sonic, a new foundational AI model that seamlessly combines speech recognition and voice generation into a single streamlined system.
While the US and China race ahead on AI, the EU is rolling out a massive new plan to catch up without giving up on its core values around privacy, safety, and public oversight.
Google enhanced their AI mode, announced an enhancement of their VO2 video generation model, also announced the agent-to-agent protocol.
Is AI usage now a job requirement? At Shopify, the answer is yes.
Welcome back to What the AI, where we decode the latest developments in the world of artificial intelligence. So Annie, I got an email from a friend this week about the British Airways chatbot. It was pretty funny. It's an AI story. Did you see this?
I saw this. What an epic fail.
So for those who have not seen it, we'll put the link in the show notes. But the British Airways chatbot, when asking about airports, it said, just tell us where you are. For example, an airport code like LHR or a city name like London. And this poor guy's got a video of himself typing LHR and it says, I'm sorry, I don't know where that is. And then he says London, says, I'm sorry, I don't know where that is. And the whole way, and it's British Airways and it's Heathrow Airport and it's just hysterical. But what a pretty massive fail on that front.
I know. And it's so funny because one of the just sort of use cases that everyone's talking about for AI is it's going to be able to book your travel and all this stuff. And it's like, well, apparently not, because even British Airways doesn't know its own code for its home airport.
The example that it used in the chatbot for what you could type in didn't work in the chat. So note to those out there launching chatbots, I would do a little QA before you put it out the door, because this is a pretty embarrassing moment for anybody. That video it's pretty hysterical though. If you watch it, I had a good laugh.
100%. Well, maybe they should have used a better model. I don't know.
Maybe they should have used a better model.
Yep. Let's start with AI Radar, the segment where we break down the biggest headlines and updates from the world's leading AI players. Think of it as your quick fire pulse check on what's hot in AI this week. Jeff, what do you got for us?
All right, we'll start off with a better model because, apparently British Airways, take note, here we go. Meta has announced their Llama 4 suite of multimodal AI models. So text, audio, video, imagery with industry-leading capabilities. Because everybody who puts out a model has to make it industry-leading.
Gotta be industry-leading.
Gotta be state-of-the-art. SOTA, that's my favorite phrase now, SOTA, so it's state-of-the-art. Comes in three versions. The Scout model, which is the smallest, but has the largest context window at 10 million tokens, which is really big and kind of very efficiently designed for a GPU. I'm thinking this one's going to be the one I put on my little NVIDIA box when it comes in May, and I can play around with this one. Its larger sibling Maverick, which features a 400 billion parameter count, a 1 million token context window, and that one performs roughly like Gemini 2.0 Flash or GPT 4.0. So on a lot of the benchmarks that they use, seems to be kind of equivalent. And then there is a previewed but not released very large model they called Behemoth, because just name it what it is, right? It's a 2 trillion parameter model expected to be as good or better than GPT 4.5 or Gemini 2.5. It's not yet released. It was apparently the training model that was distilled into Maverick and Scout, but they haven't actually finally released this full one. And they did switch to what's called a mixture of experts architecture, which for those who aren't as familiar, the mixture of experts takes a model with, let's say, 2 trillion parameters like Behemoth, but only activates a small number of them for any given query. So it kind of figures out which parts of the model are relevant for this prediction. And so it's just much more efficient at processing than a standard 2 trillion parameter model would be, because you're kind of using just the part of your brain that you need to answer the question at hand.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting. I sort of think about it like a hospital. You go in and you might have some sort of ailment and you need to talk to the cardiologist and the pediatrician or whatever it might be, but you don't need to see every single doctor in the hospital. And the interesting unlock here is efficiency, speed. It is going to hopefully solve a lot of the challenges that model developers are facing with things like inference time and that type of stuff. So based on all of those sort of promises of this mixture of experts capability. Do you think this is sort of the future for everyone? Is everyone gonna go this direction?
Yeah, a lot of the models are already headed this way or have done this. So mixture of experts, it's not new really. It's new for Llama, but not new for the industry. And I think it's very clear that you just can't afford to run the biggest models all the time. I mean, to get them smarter, we're making them bigger. There's a question about whether that will continue, but to the extent it does, you can't run them at the full size, effectively and cost effectively. And so I think this kind of mixture of experts approach, where you're, figuring out, hey, I came in with a heart problem, just ask the cardiologist. Don't ask the psychologist. Don't ask the dermatologist. It's fine. Those we'll ask them other stuff. Is a really useful approach for them in getting efficiency for these larger models.
Yeah, very interesting.
Well, next up, we got OpenAI with a memory upgrade to ChatGPT. This kind of late breaking news as we're recording on Friday came out yesterday, but they're essentially enabling ChatGPT to reference all of your previous chats. Not just so that previously had things like memory or little custom instructions you could set for things you wanted it to remember for you about all chats. But now any chat you've had in the past can be used as reference information for the chat you're having with ChatGPT. Theoretically, going to help it understand your learning style, your writing style, things you like, and make more "quote unquote" personalized responses. Rolling out currently for ChatGPT Plus and Pro. So people paying money going to see it first. But I expect it's coming to the rest of us relatively quickly because that's what they always do.
Yeah. Did you try it out for yourself? I know you pay the big subscription, so
Well, I do. I pay the subscription just to be able to do stuff like this. It was interesting. So the first thing it did, it kind of popped up a little ad and said, "Try it." And I said, "Sure." And you've probably done that thing where you say, "Based on everything you know about me, draw a picture of my life," and it puts up. So it had a default prompt that was a little different, and it just said, "Describe me based on all our chats and make it catchy." And so I didn't type that, but it came out with a little like paragraph. What drives him cutting through hype to surface of what actually works. That was its little description of what drives me. I don't know. So it was pretty fun. And then it engaged in some conversation and said, "Here's my question for you. What's something totally unrelated to work that you've always wanted to learn or try?" And so it was really interesting, but it definitely was pulling from my health related chats, my work related chats, my, personal interest related chats, and had a much more diverse perspective on me when it asked that question. So it was kind of fun.
that is fun. I asked Chat a while ago to generate based on what you know about me, generate an image. This was, of course, before the, image upgrades, and it was just the old school DALL-E, but, the image was hilarious because Chat made me a white dude with a beard in a boardroom giving a presentation on AI with a name tag that said "man-pliance." I kid you not.
Man plants?
Man-pliance, I kid you not, which, of course, it's just because, like, Chat can never spell anything in those images, but the particular thing it came up with was so good. It was hilarious.
That's a pretty good failure mode. I gotta say, like,
I
that
know.
one gave me a good laugh. I
Yeah.
like it.
Yep.
All right. Well, Microsoft out also unveiling major updates to its AI platform, Copilot, positioning it as I think we've seen this in the past, the personalized AI companion for workers and for individuals. Um, New features include memory for personal context, real-time vision and image recognition on mobile and Windows, automated actions for things like booking travel, although hopefully not British Airways if we're relying on their chatbot to tell you how to navigate Heathrow Airport. Um, and this one's really interesting to me because so many of these things are layered on top of multiple models or different models, or they didn't even talk about which model they're using. They're really focused on delivering these kind of more full-featured capabilities without saying, "Hey, I just released a new model." And that I don't even think they told us which ones are underneath it, though mostly they've been OpenAI models. So interesting to see Microsoft leaning into the productization of the models and the context of its various applications and experiences.
It's true. They're leaning in. I think they're doing a great job, and I sort of feel like they're eating Google's lunch here because Google should, in theory, be able to have all the same capabilities. It has all the same feature set that you're integrated with, but all of its AI capabilities are sort of like siloed away from one another. So you have Notebook LM, and that's separate from Gemini, and that's separate from, Nova, and this, that, and the other thing. And so I mean, I think it's great that Microsoft has them all integrated, and I wonder, I've asked this before, if this is gonna start to take market share away from Google if they can't figure out how to be more functional and, like, cross-pollinating within their organization.
It wouldn't be surprising, and it's this interesting debate for people in Silicon Valley about whether Google has lost the ability to build real product. They've always been a very technically oriented, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. The original Google PageRank and the ranking algorithms were like hardcore computer science problems, and it kind of makes you think they never had really to build a product. Like the product was just one little box and a button or two buttons, so I don't know that they've ever really had a great muscle of building user-facing products of any level of complexity versus building back-end infrastructure and technology that scales. I mean, Gmail was earth-shattering, but mostly because it came with a gigabyte of storage, which is a back-end infrastructure thing, not a consumer product thing, really. And so it really feels like they're producing great models, but don't know how to turn them into great products, which I think we sometimes think of as a break from history, but maybe it's just a continuation of the reality that Google's never been particularly great at these things, with the notable exception of NotebookLM.
Yeah, fair enough.
Anthropic, getting in the game to collect some more money, introduced a Claude Max subscription specifically aimed at professionals who are heavy users. They have a $100 a month and a $200 a month option that offer variously 5 or 20 times more use allowed than the standard Claude offering. So I guess they were just jealous of OpenAI's $200 a month Pro, and they're like, we're just going to have a Claude Max too and put you in there for $200 a month so you can use this all the time.
Yeah, I'm curious if they get big adoption because I have a feeling if you were willing to pay $200 for the, Chat Pro, are you willing to pay $400 to have both? Or like, you know what I mean? Probably not. So
I think not, but I do think it's probably if you're a professional that is deeply integrated and just uses this stuff constantly, you're doing 5 deep research projects a day, paying, at that point, the level of efficiency you're getting is probably easily justifies $200 a month for many people. And I don't think it's going to be most people who do this, but for those people who want that level of utilization or are willing to pay and get the value, you might as well take the money.
yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to Amazon, who launched their Nova Sonic, a new foundational AI model that seamlessly combines speech recognition and voice generation into a single streamlined system. Very low latency, significantly outperforming OpenAI's current voice offerings with extremely low error rate, especially in noisy environments. So this was interesting. They also announced Nova Reels, extending video generation to up to 2 minutes in their clips. And both of these available through Amazon's Bedrock. So again, you see Amazon out there kind of going, we're the infrastructure provider. All you developers, we got some awesome models sitting over here. Just come build some great app on top of it and run it on AWS and pay us some money for it all. But investing in those kind of foundational models for developers on their own, particularly obviously for the AWS platform.
Yeah, cool.
Well, while we're on image related topics, Google enhanced their AI modes. This is the new kind of chat GPT version of Google search, right? The chat version. And they kind of integrated what we previously you might have called Google Lens in with a new Gemini based model. So you can now take pictures in AI mode and ask questions about what you're seeing. I talked about this with a coffee a couple weeks ago. We're taking a photo of my Nespresso pod to figure out what the heck I'm trying to drink. So it's out there today on Android and iOS. And probably the most interesting technical part of this is what they call fan out. And the example they gave was if you take a picture of a bookshelf, it can do searches on each of the book titles and return multiple results for different pieces it sees in the image. But to our point about product earlier, it's still a static image where I can go into advanced voice mode in the Chat GPT app and turn on live video and just move around and point at different things and ask what's going on. And they don't have that capability yet in the Google app. So nice addition, but still feels like they're playing catch up.
It's static image, but it's at least integrated. So it's maybe the first step towards some of that integration that we were just talking about. So integrated with some of their other products. But yeah, they just feel behind.
Well, they feel behind, but here's 2 more stories from Google to round us out in this. So first, they announced an enhancement of their VO2 video generation model, including kind of better in painting, which is removal of objects you didn't want in the scene, and out painting, which is kind of imagine you did a zoom in and you want the zoomed out version, figure out what would have been around the video that I've got. Both of those there. Better job kind of maintaining consistency, being used by companies like L'Oreal and Kraft for generation of and editing of, obviously advertisements in those cases. And a lot of them saying they're able to significantly increase their time, their speed to production for these things. So again, here's a great example of Google back-end model, very good enhancements, seems to be really well reviewed. Product, not as good on the externalizing it to product side.
Cool.
And my last story here for our AI radar, Google also, a lot of announcements. It's their Google Next conference this week, so I think we're going to get a lot of stuff, but announced the agent to agent protocol, A2A, nice name, easy to understand, which is kind of a framework for letting AI agents talk to one another. So sharing tasks across different applications. They got about 50 partners in here, including big B2B SaaS providers like Salesforce, Atlassian, SAP. And this is really, you can compare it to Anthropic's MCP, their model context protocol, which also supported by Google. And MCP really about, I want to call out and get a piece of data, or I want a particular tool. I know I need to calculate the distance between A and B. Here's a mapping tool that can do that and give me the answer. So an agent calling out to kind of more of a tool level. And this is a little more of an agent calling out to an agent saying, I've got a big task for you. I'm the marketing guy. Here's a marketing campaign. I want you to do that. I'm the centralized planning agent. So agent to agent communication. We'll see if we really see people leveraging these, but interesting to see Google really getting into this kind of not just the agents, but the how do we collaborate and synchronize between agents trying to get real work done.
Yeah, I think this one is actually super important. You and I talked several weeks ago, well, maybe even months ago now at this point, about, like when we're talking about agents, there's one sort of use case of an agent where the agent does stuff on the consumer's behalf and it can interact with a computer interface that was designed for a human versus an agent interacting with an agent, and they can interact in this very computer language and sort of natural state, and how much faster that's going to be if instead of having to teach the agent to behave like a human through an interface designed for humans, instead it can just interact in this sort of universal computer language type of thing. So I think that's going to be a super interesting thing to watch unfold, but unclear sort of how people will figure out to get use from that in the immediate term. But I think in the long term, this is going to be pretty critical.
Yeah, certainly if you see a world of agents coming where they're very capable, you're going to start to have people already talk about teams of agents, and some way to coordinate agent to agent is going to be really important. Hopefully they have better meetings than most of the meetings I've been in. I hope they're able to collaborate a little more seamlessly than sometimes I've seen.
Probably stay on task a little bit better than humans.
Yeah, that ruins the fun of it though, doesn't it?
Fair enough.
All right, well, let's move on to our AI in the wild segment where we zoom in on how AI is being used out in the real world by companies, communities, and creators. We'll explore some practical, surprising, and sometimes even wild use cases. Annie, what do you got for us for AI in the wild this week?
Jeff, I have some great stories. What if AI could unlock hidden cures from existing medications? Startup Every Cure are harnessing AI to find new treatments from overlooked drugs. So this is super interesting. What we're seeing is this startup, the founder is a doctor who had a very rare illness. I actually didn't even ever know what it was before. I had to look it up and did a little bunny trail on that. But he had a rare illness that was basically untreatable. And he was told by his doctors that he, was going to die from this illness. And so he actually used AI to look at all of the sort of existing drug therapies for other illnesses to see if any of these drug therapies could benefit him. And it saved his life. He found one. So he took a drug that was used for another illness and through using AI, was able to find out that it could actually also treat his very rare illness. And then he made this startup, and they have found dozens of other similar things. So drugs that are for, one illness and actually can help improve symptoms of autism or ALS or cancer, this type of thing. And so it's actually pretty amazing application of AI to take something that's already in existence and approved by the FDA. We have something like 500 drugs approved by the
Hmm.
FDA and about 20,000 illnesses. Right? So there's like a
That's a
pretty bad ratio there in terms of drugs to illnesses. And so basically taking some of those drug therapies and seeing like, can they treat some of these other lesser known illnesses that not as many scientists are out there researching and really trying to understand. This one's super near and dear to my heart. But for listeners, I'm a type 1 diabetic, which is a relatively uncommon autoimmune disorder compared to the much more common type 2 diabetes that has something like, for every type 1 diabetic, I think there's 40 type 2 diabetics. So a lot of the research dollars go into type 2 diabetes, but it'd be pretty great for type 1 diabetes to get some research love. So this type of thing where some of these lesser known illnesses can be treated through other pathways is pretty amazing. So I was excited about this one.
This is really exciting, and I thought for our audience, such a great example of different ways you can apply AI to a similar problem space. In terms of, we've talked a lot of times on here about people trying to find new drugs based on, you know, researching efficacy of model, but basically trying to design a new molecule or a new drug to treat a specific disease. But here, a totally different approach going, we got a lot of stuff that's out there that we know is safe and has been tested for safety. But, a lot of times you see these side effects or, and a lot of drugs start off with off-label uses. Many of the most common drugs actually started off with their primary use now being an off-label, meaning not intended use case. And so being able to actually sort through that world of drugs with that world of illnesses and go, where are things where maybe the off-label use or the side effect or the unintended thing is the thing that maybe can provide real value is a fascinating, different approach to this, not looking at the fundamental science, but looking at just the data. And I'm curious your take as a compliance person here, because this kind of research is much easier when we make access to, let's say, medical health records across the country available to researchers. Maybe you don't have a personal connection, but you can imagine that if we knew every illness people had and every drug they were taking, we could actually find these things just by using the real world as our control space, our trial space. And so that's it really pushes on the boundary of, privacy being important, particularly for medical data, but also as you have more data available, accessible, at least anonymized, you can start to find things like this where you can find treatments for diseases that might otherwise be not be found and certainly wouldn't be easy to come up with and do a controlled trial for.
Yeah, it's a paradoxical question that I think is causing a lot of stir and debate in policy spaces because many of the policies that we came up with as a society were very well intentioned at the time given the risks at the time and have not don't age as well when you think about an AI future because the very things that would benefit the end objective you're looking for are now prohibited by the policies. So classic example in lending space is you're not allowed to use demographic data in a lending decision. Well, when we decided that in the 1970s, that was a very prudent decision to make because the biggest sort of threat was people using it for bias. But now with AI, it could actually, if allowed to be used, could actually solve bias problems. So there's actually a big benefit to figuring out how to use that, but we're prohibited from doing so. And I think that there's gonna be a bunch of examples like this, that are gonna AI is gonna push against the existing sort of policy infrastructure. This is definitely one of them, right? You wanna use an off-label drug. What about the FDA approval? What about the off-label thing? What about the insurance company? And are they gonna cover the drug if it is off-label and so on and so forth? And so the existing sort of regulatory and policy framework is going to be counter to the actual intended purpose of that thing when you start to have all of this unlocked by AI that was previously thought impossible.
Well, if nothing else, our current president has encouraged the policy community to fundamentally rethink underlying assumptions. I'm not sure I agree with the way he's approached that particular thing, but I do think there's a lot of cases in which government is a little too slow to rethink policies that were well intentioned in sets of procedures, but are not necessarily serving their intended purposes. Maybe they never did. Maybe they did at a time and that time has passed, or the world has changed in some ways, the presence of AI and new tools. And I would love to think that we can enter a world, maybe take a little bit of the direction that we've got politically in that way and use it to rethink policies that really are holding us back from achieving what are now achievable objectives and improvements for the quality of life for people.
I hope so too. I mean, you made this point a couple of weeks ago, but if you are trying to write policy or regulation in a way that conforms to a specific technology, you're always going to be behind. Technology is
Always.
always going to move faster. So, really thinking through how to write it at a conceptual and philosophical level is going to be even more important for the future because the speed of advancement is so rapid right now compared to what it's ever been in the past. And so I think that that's the big need. And I think it's good that we're rethinking things. I think the problem with how people are framing the rethinking is just get rid of, and that's not really going to solve the problem. Like, oh, just stop doing it at all doesn't solve the problem. It's actually doing it well that would solve the problem. And so, like, can we just, instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, can we just figure out how to do things better? It would be a great place to get to.
It would be. All right. What else you got for us?
All right. Next up, can AI craft engaging minute long videos from simple text prompts? I love this story. First and foremost, because it is a model based on Tom and Jerry cartoons. That was what was used in the training
Can't
set.
beat Tom and Jerry. Tom and
You
Jerry is,
you
you really
can't get
can't.
better than Tom and Jerry, so I just absolutely love it. But so basically this new, sort of video module is pretty remarkable. 60-second videos, 1-minute long videos are possible using this, sort of technology. The previous benchmark before this, you could maybe get a video to follow the thread for, like, 5 seconds. So this is actually a much longer, video that will be able to sort of keep the context and follow the thread for a longer period of time. So this is pretty cool to see. I think it's gonna, streamline workflows, reduce time and resources needed for video production. Maybe we'll see more types of industries or more types of
Uh,
companies be able to actually leverage video production in a compelling way. Because traditionally you had to have a pretty deep, pocketbook to be able to
yeah.
spend the time on the studio and the lighting and all this type of stuff to make a really high quality video. But maybe some of these new AI videos can bring more players into the space.
Yeah, I love that perspective. I mean, I was posting about some of these tools, and I got a lot of feedback from some users who were, what about the people whose jobs are being taken away, or these people who would have made these videos? And I think the easy thing to forget is a number of businesses in this example for advertising, let's say, or filmmakers, aspiring college students who want to become filmmakers who just don't have access to the kinds of tools of production. And so you really democratize access to that capability to produce both commercially, businesses that can advertise using video, which is obviously the most engaging form of content right now in our digital landscape. And then aspiring artists and filmmakers who go, I don't have access to fancy cameras and all the nice equipment and post production. Forget the software; it's the people who know how to do it. I mean, there's a reason it takes years to go from when they finish filming a movie till you see it in the theater, and that's a lot of effort and work going in. And I'm sure that some of that will maintain for the high-end films, but it means it's almost inaccessible for a lot of students. And so these kinds of capabilities, I feel like in the video space, I don't know if you feel this, but I feel like we keep seeing new announcements. It makes me feel like LLMs a year or two ago, where it just felt like every week the state of the art was moving somewhere new. And I feel like not that LLMs are slow, but that we don't, every week doesn't feel like a total revolution in LLMs, but it kind of does in video and image generation, where every week somebody's coming out with one or two or three new examples of, hey, we can do this crazy new stuff in video, which is very exciting.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting as well. Well, from Tom and Jerry to the Munchkins and Glinda, can AI help breathe new life into classic cinema? This is also a very cool story. So, Google has teamed up with the Las Vegas Sphere. Have you been to the Sphere?
I've been by the sphere, but not in the sphere. Have you been to the sphere?
I have been to the Sphere, Jeff. The Sphere is like if we made a new seven wonders of the technological world, I think the Sphere is in that list.
Well,
It's
I'm
like
trying to get tickets to the Dead and Co., the kind of Grateful Dead plus John Mayer that plays there. My son is a big fan, so we may go watch the Dead and Co. in the sphere.
well, I am a big Deadhead, and I have been to see the Dead and Co. 6 times at the Sphere, and I'm going back 3 more times at the end of this month. So I strongly agree with your
Oh,
son that you
wow.
need tickets.
We're gonna have to go make that happen.
You gotta make it happen, but if Dead& Co. is not your thing, if you are not a Deadhead, you can go see The Wizard of Oz at the Sphere, and so what, Google has done is they have teamed up with the Sphere to create a stunningly immersive version of one of the most, sort of technically advanced movies of the time, an 86-year-old classic, The Wizard of Oz, specifically for the Sphere's sort of enormous
Yeah, yeah.
160,000 square foot screen. They've used Google's advanced AI capabilities, their Gemini models, the video model you just talked about a second ago, to drastically enhance the film's resolution. They've sort of extended the backgrounds. They've put characters into the frame that previously didn't fit in the frame but should have been in the scene for whatever reason, because they would have been off camera at the time of filming. And then to maintain authenticity, Google trained its AI using extensive archival material from Warner Brothers, such as the original scripts, production photographs, set illustrations, etc. And they have come up with a new rendition of The Wizard of Oz specifically for the Sphere. Pretty cool.
This is pretty cool. I loved the fact that they not only resolutioned it for a bigger screen, because obviously that didn't have the quality of resolution that you need to put it on 160,000 square feet or whatever that crazy screen is, but that they reimagined what was possible for that space while trying to be as true as they could be to the original artistic vision with the production notes. And so that's a really interesting. I imagine there will be, much like the AI and the Grammys debate, like the haters who don't think we should be messing with a classic movie in this way. But I thought it was a pretty creative way to leverage AI to just reimagine that world and universe and put it into a totally new environment that it couldn't possibly have been made for. It just, the sphere didn't exist. Nothing like the sphere was in anybody's imagination when they made the Wizard of Oz 86 years ago, but they're making it, up to date for that environment. I thought it was pretty cool. I'm a big fan. Well, I don't know, a big fan of the movie. I got to go see it before I say it, but I like the idea of using these tools to reinvigorate that kind of a movie experience.
I think so too. And, haters gonna hate, but that's how art works. How many people are recreating versions of Shakespeare's story? Here we are, like millennium later, right? Because those stories are still relevant and they still have lessons and they're still entertaining. And so they're borrowed and they're tweaked and we give them in different mediums. And you see them classically in the park and you also see them in, new modern movies and this type of stuff. And so seeing the of Oz in that sort of light, I think that this is pretty cool. There's no place like the Sphere.
There's no face. All right. Well, I'm
That's the new
gonna
mantra.
reinvigorate my desire to go actually see the Dead and Co. at the Sphere, and maybe the Wizard of Oz while I'm there, because why not?
Why
Sounds
not?
like fun. Well, to wrap things up, let's dive into our AI alignment segment. This is where things get a little philosophical and sometimes political. We'll unpack the latest debates, policies, and ethical dilemmas, of which there are plenty that are shaping a path to a safer and smarter AI future. Andy, what do you got for us this week in AI alignment? This is always a little bit of a philosophical, one of my favorite segments. So what do you got for us?
Me too, one of my favorite segments. Well, while the US and China race ahead on AI, the EU is rolling out a massive new plan to catch up without giving up on its core values around privacy, safety, and public oversight. That's a big promise. We'll see if they can do it. So, specifically, what we're talking about here is the European Union is ramping up its efforts to close their AI gap with the US and China, and they're investing heavily in their infrastructure through an ambitious plan they're calling the AI Continent Action Plan. And the plan involves creating a network of AI gigafactories, which is my new favorite word. I'm going to try to use it in a sentence multiple times. Gigafactories, large scale facilities equipped with about 100,000 cutting edge AI chips, 4 times more than the current setup to train complex AI models. And while they do this, they've pledged about 200 billion euros in investments into this capability. They are also doubling down and committing that they will be the first to build all of this capability with a sort of consumer first ethical and privacy framework that complies with their existing regulations. So um, that might sound boring to say, if Europe solves this compliant AI at scale, they're going to own the trust layer, but it's actually pretty freaking important. It's you have to make a bet about whether they can do it and whether it's even possible. But if they can do it, half of the United States GDP is from highly regulated industries that could really use a high trust, high fidelity AI model that actually sort of figured out how to crack this code. So there's a big opportunity for them if they can figure it out.
Well, put me in the skeptic camp. Sorry, I mean, I love me some EU. I love to visit many places in the EU, but I don't think the government that brought us the GDPR and the cookie banners around the world in an attempt to protect privacy is going to find the balance right. And this title killed me. So one of the people speaking about this was the EU Executive Vice President for Tech Sovereignty, Security, and Democracy. And I just felt like anytime you give somebody that title, you're just destined to not achieve one of the things you're trying there. But also telling to me that this was a government kind of project, an EU-wide, I mean, maybe you want to call the EU an Uber government or whatever, but not really private industry driving forward here. So I wish them well. I'm sure the data centers will go to good use. I mean, I'm sure there will be plenty of people to use that capacity. But the idea that the EU is going to somehow go from where they are in the race to building the leading edge AI to being first on the back of laws and regulations brought to you by those who brought you the Digital Markets Act and the GDPR felt a little far fetched to me in terms of their ability to actually execute on that. So we'll see. I wish them luck, but if I were a betting man, I would not bet against their becoming world leading in AI systems on this basis.
Yeah, I think I share your skepticism. And if I can rabbit hole a little bit on why I share their skepticism, because I think this is really important. I think that a lot of the sort of stated objectives, and we've talked about this before, so forgive me if I'm sounding like I'm ranting on old news, but we've talked about how there's this stated, need for privacy that people find to be very important. And the EU has, sort of codified in law is very important to them in their GDPR, but it is fundamentally at odds with how AI works. And so it's totally unclear how you even comply with those things if you're going to use AI at all. And so, like, the three big problems are like, first, the data consent bottleneck, right? So GDPR requires clear consent from a user to use their personal data. But AI models thrive on these massive, really messy data sets, right? So imagine if, like, Wikipedia and Reddit and all of those types of things, and every time you're commenting on something, you have to give consent for it to feed this model. The model just has a lot less public information, and it's live on a website, so it's actually public. And I would argue you sort of gave consent when you posted
Published it
that thing
publicly on
published
the
on a
internet.
website. But in the EU, you can't use those types of data sets in model training because you did not get this sort of explicit consent. So that's like problem number one. Problem number two is the right to be forgotten. So if somebody says, I want to be erased and take all of my data out of the model, it's like so unclear how to actually do that. It's like borrowing an egg from your neighbor and you use it to make a cake, and then they come back and they're like, I want that egg back.
That's a great analogy.
That's gonna be pretty hard to do, right? And so that's kinda how it is when your data has been used to train an AI model, and so that's sort of friction number 2. And then I think friction number 3 is this explainability mandate, right? So GDPR demands that AI decisions be explainable, but that's really hard, and the sort of definition of how explainable is a little bit of a technical and legal mismatch, especially, I think, when you layer that with the right to be forgotten. Like, I need to explain this decision, but I also have to have deleted the data when they asked me, so now how do I explain the decision? Because I just erased the thing that would help me connect the dots, and so they have an uphill battle to actually be able to achieve this thing that they've said that they're gonna achieve without moving the goalpost, like, by massively changing GDPR in some way. So it's gonna be interesting. But like I said, if they can do it, because 'cause don't assume it can't be done, it's gonna be a big competitive advantage, I think.
Oh, I like that. Working in one of Upstart's core philosophies into the
Yeah.
podcast very subtly for those who don't know. Don't assume it can't be done. Upstart core belief. Love it. That was very subtle, Annie. Very nicely done. All right, bring us home.
Bring us home. Let's talk about Shopify. Is
Mm.
AI usage now a job requirement? At Shopify, the answer is yes, resounding yes. In an unusually candid internal memo, which became first leaked and then later publicly shared to avoid any sort of talk or whatever about the leak, Shopify CEO declared reflexive AI usage as a baseline expectation for all employees. And he likened usage of AI to using the internet or electricity and said it should be embedded in every phase of product development, prototyping, so on and so forth. It's going to be part of your standard performance review. So when I do your performance review, one of the skills that I'm going to be assessing is how well you use AI. And if you come to me and ask for resources, I am going to ask you to prove why AI can't do it first before I give you any more money or headcount for that thing. So this is really sort of an early signal, I think, of seeing how the workplace culture is going to be reshaped to normalize AI as sort of a skills multiplier, reinforcing things like constant learning, thriving on change, so on and so forth. So I personally loved this memo. I think it's a great manifesto. Curious your take on it.
I actually thought it is both bold and not incredible, not particularly bold in the sense that I think this is what every executive at most companies is thinking, but not really ready to say. So I thought it was not bold in the sense I think a lot of people are going, yeah, I expect everybody to be like, if there's a new tool that can make you more effective at your job, you should be using it. And I thought it was bold in the sense that he came out and said it and very clearly, like it'll be part of your peer reviews, it'll be part of your performance review. When you come to me and say, I need 3 people to do this thing, you can say, well, have you tried using an AI agent to do it instead? Like, why can't we do that? I thought I think it's a sign of things to come almost everywhere for white collar work where AI is going to be applied. The biggest pushback I got because I shared this on my social media accounts and got a lot of pushback actually, and most of it around they described their approach to learning about how to use AI most effectively as learn on your own and share what you learn. And I heard a lot of people going, "How can you make an expectation of people to use a tool for which you provided no education, knowledge, or training about how to use the tool," which was an interesting, bit of feedback. So, I don't know what you think about that.
I think that's I think it's really interesting, and I think actually it's related to something I was thinking about, when I read this and think I mean, I have a large team. I manage, several hundred people, obviously not directly, but in my sort of chain. And so one of the things that I'm constantly pushing my leaders on, like in my next level down managers, is that one of the expectations I have on them as managers is to prepare their teams for the future. And so they need to be leaning into learning these tools and then training their teams how to use the tools as well, because I think we have an obligation to the folks that we're developing up to develop them up, right? And so we need to be willing to sort of lean in and say, I'm going to give you some space. Maybe you don't know how to teach the thing because you don't know it yet, but giving them a few hours to like go and learn something, take a class, kick around a tool, whatever it might be, I think is super important because I've said this before and I say it to people regularly. Like, should you be afraid of AI taking your job? No, but you should be afraid of a person who uses AI better than you and therefore becoming twice as productive as you taking your job. So start learning, right? So if I can hire a software engineer that can produce 3 times as much code, or I can hire somebody who produces one amount of code with no I think I'm going to pick the 3 times as productive person. And so it's really important for us to be really encouraging our staff to embrace these tools and see how they can use them, not just for the company's benefit, but also from their own benefit, because this is very much like a who moved my cheese type of scenario where like AI is here, someone moved your cheese, we got to go find new cheese. Have you read that book? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I read it
Okay, good.
many years ago, but I have read Who Moved
Okay.
My Cheese. Gotta go find the new ch where they moved the cheese to.
Go find the new cheese. And this is really very much how I think about this. This is not a bury your head in the sand moment and hope that it doesn't come for your job, because every industry will be disrupted. It's just a matter of like to what degree. So it's really important to sort of think about how you're training your staff, what expectations you're having, what tools are we using, how are we all learning together. I think that's an important thing for us all to be talking about.
And I'm sure it will not be evenly distributed in terms of how well people actually do this over time. But it's, I think, been true for a long time that the most effective employees are power users of the key tools for getting their work done, right? For some people, that's email. And I look at, so if you spend all day in an email inbox and you're not a power user of your emails, if you're not a power user of your spreadsheet, and so many executives and people who are not data analysts like get a lot of leverage out of being really good at a spreadsheet, being able to do quick data analysis and chart and this is going to be a foundational tool like that for white collar work. And if you are not becoming a power user of this tool, a smart user, a capable user, then you're falling behind. And that's just the reality. Is advice I would give to anybody in their career. Like figure out what the tools are in your space that are critical and become really good user of, become a power user. And I think AI is going to be that for almost everybody. So, I think it's well worth it to go out and become a power user of AI, whether Toby demands it of you because you work at Shopify or not. I think your future self will thank you for the investments you make in becoming a really knowledgeable, effective user of AI tools.
I think that's right. And I think I always tell people that one of the sort of things that they don't, especially younger people, they don't tell you in college that when you get into the workforce, you don't have a academic advisor or a, RA or whatever it might be that's like curating and managing your career
Mm.
for you. You have to manage it yourself. And so in that sort of light, I want to give a practical plug for a use case of AI that somebody told me yesterday that I would never have thought of. That was, I thought, very interesting. But this person said, what I did is I took the last 4 years of my written performance reviews that I've received from my various managers. I plugged them into chat, and I also just gave a random sampling of my work, some Zoom transcripts and some emails and this type of stuff. And I asked it to give me practical advice about things that I could have done differently in these work contexts that would have like achieved this specific feedback I've gotten about myself in the performance review. And I thought that is genius, because in a performance review, it's always hard to come up with like the tangible right now examples. But that is a great unlock to just get yourself incrementally better at your career and building your career and building your professionalism every day, that I thought was a pretty unique application. And I loved it.
That is fantastic. And it makes me wonder when the manager who's writing the performance review will have access to some sort of a tool like that to go, there's this thing I believe is true, but can you, and maybe we'll tell you you're wrong. This doesn't really happen. But I think more often you go, can you just give me some examples of this? Because it's, I've always had that where I'm sitting there going, "Wait, I know, like, but unless I write it down in the moment, it's hard to go back and find the example of the time." That is a fantastic use case. We're gonna have to pull that out and make a micro video out of that because that's I think a use case everybody should be doing. I'm now curious to do it on myself, but I'm a little scared to figure out how many instances of time it finds that could do. But I love that one.
That is so funny. That's exactly what the person said. He said, some of the feedback was a little too real for me, and I had to digest it. And then other feedback was very on point, and I was ready to hear that other part of the feedback.
But maybe it's easier to have that moment with a chatbot telling you that than it is with your manager in the moment when you're sitting across the table going, "Ooh, yeah, that stung a little bit, a little too close to home," but probably because it's true.
Yeah, you're in the no judgment zone with the chatbot versus sitting with your manager who's about to decide how much to pay you or not pay you the next year. Right? It's a very different dynamic. So
And one you can come back to over and over with a chatbot and learn over time, not just a one time. Love it. That's a great use case. And I think we'll leave it there for this week, but I'm sure the world of AI will deliver us new news to talk about next week. So I'll see you next week.
I'll see you next week.
Ready to expand your AI knowledge? Want to become the go-to AI expert in your organization? Take the next step with Upstart's AI certification for financial services. This comprehensive course simplifies the fundamentals of artificial intelligence for financial services professionals. Both the course and this podcast are brought to you by Upstart, whose leading AI lending marketplace connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products, from personal loans to auto loans to home equity lines of credit. If you learned something useful this week, Hit subscribe on YouTube or leave us a rating on iTunes or Spotify. Your support can help others discover What the AI. And finally, share your biggest AI questions and insights with us at email@whattheai.fm. We really do read every message, and we do our best to cover them all on the show.